Well, nationally, Memorial Day can be traced back to 1866, which is the year after the Civil War ended. Here in Duluth, the annual Memorial Day Parade on Grand Avenue traces back to 1960. Rosie and Joe Stradiotti started that dream. Dave Anderson shares how the community has kept that dream alive in this week's Holding On to History.
Rosie Stradiotti loved local baseball from the Dukes to the Huskies, but she loved local veterans even more. She organized West Duluth's first Memorial Day Parade in 1960 to pay them tribute.
I started with one unit, just one unit, but we went.
Rosie and her husband Joe kept the parade going for more than 50 years. It was their way to remember those who have served and all who have fallen in battle.
Not only for my husband, where my dad was a World War vet, but I'm glad to do for the veterans that gave their lives for their country.
Joe Stradiotti passed away in 1986, so Rosie kept parade organizing solo for at least 2 more decades. Age eventually slowed Rosie from organizer to observer, but with the hope others would keep the Memorial Day tradition going.
I just got to go on with it, hoping that it'll continue on after I get quit.
Rosie Stradiotti passed away from COVID at age 89 in 2020. Others did step up to lead the parade. Veterans advocate Karen Henson swore helped a lot, even though she was also busy with arranging honor flights to Washington, D.C. Sharon Bergquist of Duluth Women of Today now takes a leading role in keeping the tradition alive. One of her volunteers is Vietnam War Marine vet Dan Strew. Along with organizing, he'll be marching in the lead honor guard.
It's an honor to be, in the parade, especially, the honor guard being the first unit in the parade.
Over the years, the Memorial Day Parade has featured local legends like Medal of Honor recipient Mike Colalilo and Tuskegee Airman Joe Gomer. It even honors America's Hmong allies from the Vietnam War. Karen, Sharon, and Dan hope you'll think about stepping up and helping out in the future to secure the future of this Grand Avenue get-together. Holding on to history in Duluth, Dave Anderson, Northern News Now.
Dave, thank you. Rosie Stradiotti also served 2 terms as president of the American Legion Post 71 Auxiliary.